Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Outlander is the show about Claire and Jamie Fraser, a time-travelling doctor, and her 18th century hubby. Episode 11, If Not for Hope, actually starts out with a pre-credits cold open, where we see that Roger's back in the 1970s. He's having a hot shower and enjoying... no wait, it's a fake out, he's actually back with a mohawk and just imagining it. Oh well, bad luck, Roger. Anyway, they end up getting him back to their camp, and then they make him sort of run a gauntlet of punches and kicks. Oh no. Meanwhile, Jamie and Claire are still looking for him, and it seems like the Cherokee can help them, point them in the right way in that, but they won't actually go with them because, reasons. Maybe they don't really get on with the Mohawk. Anyway, it's having its bit of a toll on them, because, each of them blames themselves and kind of each other, and there's really high tensions, and everyone's a bit guilty. And Ian tries to start playing the peacemaker a wee bit, because, there's clearly sunning up between Jamie and Claire. And it's only later on, once they actually find the body of Caleb, who got dead last week, that they all start to open up. And Claire ends up having a really big long chat with Jamie and telling him that, she isn't actually angry with him. She's just angry at the world and worried for Bree and worried for Roger. And, he ends up opening up and telling her how much guilt he's feeling because, all the stuff that Bree said to him last week, it really stung him, the stuff about him being a bad father and a savage. But anyway, Dr. Claire knows the best remedy. So they make use of the giant, ridiculous tent and get busy with the Vizzy. Where's Ian? Who knows? Anyway, back in Wilmington, Parsley's getting a bit cross with Murtagh hanging around because, he's there talking regulator stuff with Brian in the back room and hanging out in their house. But, it's bad enough that they're doing all this kind of sedition and stuff that could end up getting them in trouble. But it actually turns out that Fungus found a wanted poster for him in town. Anyway, poor Frenchie's down a bit as well, so he can't get any work on account of him only having one hand and the other one made of wood. And it feels like he's almost not a real man, he thinks. Anyway, Parsley's no idiot, so she wakes up Murtagh one night and tells him to get Fergus involved with the regulator thing, since he obviously needs people he can trust, and her husband needs to feel that he's not useless, and that would be the perfect way to do it. So next time it comes up in conversation, Murtagh does a wee ask on him, but surprise, surprise, Fungus turns him down. I mean, even though he's clearly really chuffed because he's been, asked to do it, and that cheers him up no end. But anyway, it's not important because Stephen Bonnet's in town, and so it's off down to the end to wait for him and then jump him in his room, and sly old Murtagh manages to put him down surprisingly easily. But anyway, no good kidnap ever goes unpunished, and the local cops end up spotting Murtagh in the act. So he makes out he's mugging Fergus or something, and then he points out that Bonnet's a murderer, but unfortunately, they end up recognising him from his mugshot, so he's off to the jail as well. Oh no. And the main storyline this week was actually Brianna, who's up at River Run, waiting to drop her baby, and she's getting dresses made for her, doing a wee draw of nightmarish images, and sometimes just drawing Zephedra, in her spare time, getting something done. So anyway, Auntie Jo wants to have some guests round, so reluctantly Bree says she'll play ball, and it only turns out it's Captain Wolf and a judge and Pippin from Lord of the Rings, and it becomes really obvious that this is all actually a bit of a setup to try and get her hitched off to one of these eligible guys. Anyway, it turns out that Pippin's really trying to pimp off some sweet gems. He must have got them in the Mines of Moray or something. And who walks in? Oh, it's only Lord John himself, and that kind of pisses off the rest because, he's taller and thinner and richer than all of them. So anyway, the judge doesn't seem too bothered though. Alright. And at dinner, Bree can hardly tell stories about the future, so she kicks off a wee parlour game, a bit of amateur psychology, and she asks each of them to imagine walking with a person and seeing an animal. And then, she ends up deciphering the meaning, so she asks the judge, and he says he was walking with Jesus, and he saw a squirrel that lives in his mum's garden, and she tells him that he's obviously looking for forgiveness, and that he must have secrets and things he's hiding from his mum. And understandably, he's a wee bit shook and ends up leaving the room. And then Gay John tells her that he thought of Jamie, which puts her gas at a bit of a peep. Since she doesn't really want to talk about Jamie, she's still cross with him. And then Pippin tries to convince Bree to go for an evening stroll, so she pretends to faint, and that manages to get her out of it because John has to take her away to a side room to let her relax. And then Lizzie goes in and slips that she's in the family way, and John's oh no, that's okay because secrets are fine. And then he passes a note from Jamie. And then Bree has a bit of a word with Auntie Jo, who points out, that she's penniless, pregnant, unwed, and life's going to be really tough for her and the kid if she doesn't actually marry someone. And, that kind of forestalls, Bree's crossness about the whole marriage setup thing, because she knows it's true. I mean, she is stuck in, the 1780s. And that night, she gets up and goes for a bit of a midnight snack, pregnant lady and everything, and she hears something. And it turns out it's only Johnny and the judge having a bit of a sly post-party bonk in the back room. I mean, fair enough, lads. I mean, I thought the judge didn't seem too fussed about Bree, but clearly this is why. And the next morning, she finds out that Pippin wants to meet her for breakfast, or maybe even second breakfast, and she gets Lizzie to find Lord John. And when he meets her in the garden, she tells him that she wants to marry him, since she knows his secret, and it'll be a good marriage of convenience because she doesn't actually want any of his money, and she's happy to like sign like some kind of like bit of paper to say that. And he's kind of surprised and he's flattered, but he's not really into it, probably because he fancies Jamie so much. But then she ends up like threatening to expose him for being a secret gay guy, and it turns a bit nasty. But they still sit down. And she ends up telling him about the rape and that Roger's gone, and he's quite nice to her, but he doesn't actually agree to it. So she goes back to the house, and basically there's no way out of this proposal from Pippin. But before she can actually get the words out, Lord John comes charging in, and he makes out that they've already proposed and been accepted. And by that point, Pippin's pissed off, and he pops back off to Hobbiton, and Auntie Jo's over the moon because she's like now going to be marriage linked to the Lord Grey family. And everything seems to be sorted out, and Bree and John have a wee chat on the porch about Jamie and Willie and life in general. And maybe it's about time that Bree actually read that letter. So what did I think? Well, wow. Really, wow. So much happened this week. There were like 4 separate, completely different storylines, all running in totally different places with different emotional tones and all happening over different time spaces. This is like, basically the Dunkirk episode of Outlander, because there's like totally different time frames and things happening. Roger's still with the Mohawk. We've got Jamie and Claire and Ian out in the woods dealing with like worry and guilt while they like track the way to find Roger. And like the Wilmington crew are doing all kinds of secret plotting and stuff, and as well as a bit of marital strife. And then there was all the Bree stuff with the suitors. This was a jam-packed episode. It's an episode that I don't think would be anybody's favourite of the season. Certainly nobody who's watching it. Maybe people who worked in it. But it's probably Billy Boyd's favourite one because he was in it. But anyway, it did manage to move the story forward a wee bit. And there was a real ensemble thing with like pretty much every major character getting a bit of screen time. And that's really good. I'm particularly pleased that Parsley and Fungus managed to actually get on the show again and had a bit of time in the limelight, and and they got wee baby Jermaine, and it was nice to remember that these people are actually in the story and they're just living their life, getting on with things and having their own agency and their own events. And it was good that they actually did the whole thing about Fergus, with his fake hand. And that's a nice touch because it's something that doesn't actually get mentioned very often. And it's obviously going to have an effect on how he thinks and on his life because, especially in those days, it's not like there's disabled access anywhere. And I also really liked that, Marsley was doing a bit of self dig deeping and actually like getting Murtagh to help when he's living under a roof. So she's like telling him that it's going to be this way and that way, and you better do something nice for my husband, because he needs it. And I really like that. It's nice. These are good characters. Some, Marsley maybe not so much, but certainly Fergus and Murtagh. We've grown up watching these characters for years on the show at this point. So it's really nice to actually see them doing their own thing. And it was also good that we got all this Bree stuff. I think that was quite interesting because that was sort of the slice of life stuff, because it shows that, how things were in this time, especially for like an unmarried pregnant lady. And it also shows that Bree can actually think on her feet and she can make the best of a difficult situation, because it is a difficult situation. And even though she does misstep a little bit. The whole bit where she like threatened to report Lord John to the governor, that could have gone really horribly wrong. And it probably wasn't the best way to start off a potential marriage. It was also really nice to like see the strange facets of how the suitors would do things and the way that they would, all kind of pony up to her in different ways. And I really liked that. And it was nice to actually get some of those actors back, especially like, Lieutenant Wolf again, and and him off Lord of the Rings. But that's also the problem, because there were so many people and so many things happening in this episode that I never really felt like anybody got a chance to shine. Sometimes there's so many actors on screen and doing wee parts that they're only paying lip service to the fact that these people are even there, especially when it came to the suitors. There was like the 4 guys in that room. And barely any of them actually did anything. It was all, obviously a lot of it's going to be about Lord John. And clearly, like, Billy Boyd was like, actor of the week who'd come in specially for it, being he's somebody people recognise. And that's another thing. Billy Boyd's there. Billy Boyd's not only like an actor who's well Kent face from Lord of the Rings, but he's also a musician and a comedian, and he's done loads of stage and TV in the UK. And what did he do this week on Outlander? He made a crossface a couple of times.
Indeed.
I'm not berating him and his work. He did good work, and I'm sure he's happy to actually be there and work on the show, and I'm sure everyone got paid and everything, and it's fine. But he was so underused, and the guy who played like Wolf as well. He literally was only there to like say a couple of lines and pull a face now and again. And yeah, as I said, the real story here is like about Bree and Lord John. But I can't help feel that this is like one of those situations where it would have been more interesting if there'd been a semblance of peril or personality. Like if they'd been, I'm not saying somebody should have challenged somebody to a duel or something. It's not the duelists and anything, but it could have been more like a sort of a, something else going on there. I mean, even the whole bit with like the gay judge and Lord John. I mean, we just never found out anything about that. That might have been an interesting little thing. That would have been a wee acting bit that they could have thrown in. You could have been more of that, but you never really saw any of it. I mean, granted, Bree never really saw any of it, but we're not really at that point where the one of the main characters has to see something for it to be on screen. I mean, they've kind of deviated away from that. It's not like season one where if Claire didn't see it, it didn't happen. But anyway, I never really thought for a second that Bree was actually going to marry one of these guys. I mean, as soon as Lord John turned up, it would obviously be that she was going to end up with him because that's convenient for the plot. When the wee switch at the end, yeah, it was a nice little fake out, but I kind of wanted to see, basically, I just wanted to see more Billy Boyd. Like, because it's been a long time since he did anything big like, Lord of the Rings. And it would be really nice to actually see him do something on the show other than be a bit cross and then, strut off. And another aspect that bugged me was the time passage. I mean, not just in the sense that there was things like during the Stephen Bonnet kidnap bit, it suddenly went from like nighttime to suddenly daytime, and that seemed like a bit of a weird continuity mistake. Like, if it had been that long, surely he'd have woken up because he only got dunted in the head a wee bit. I mean, you think if it had gone right from nighttime, because I mean they were waiting in the pub and presumably he came at some point during the night, and then you see him in his room, it's still nighttime, and then suddenly it's the middle of the day when Murtagh gets caught. I mean, that just seemed a bit strange. And it was a bit odd, especially considering they also mentioned earlier on in the show that Bonnet wouldn't be there for a few weeks, so we can presume a few weeks has passed since that scene. But it didn't actually feel like it. It felt like that was just the next day or something. And all the stuff with Bree, I mean, that happens overnight, basically. I mean, that was basically just, yeah, the party one evening, and then the next. I mean, there was a couple of scenes that might have been a few days apart or something before that, but everything else was just overnight. And the Jamie and Claire stuff, that was kind of vague. I didn't really know how long that was supposed to take. And the Roger stuff, you just don't know at all. I mean, was it earlier? Was it later? I mean, I feel like we might get to the point where it'll suddenly turn up there and Roger's going to be like, made chief of the Indian tribe because he's been there so long because the show hasn't really shown it. But maybe not. But the other thing was when they did that fake out with Roger at the beginning. Now, I'm glad that they literally didn't just show him being dragged away from the stones like Claire did back in season one. But it does beg the question. I mean, what was going on with that shower thing? Was that a dream? Was that his imagination? Was he wishing he was having a shower rather than getting washed by the side of a river? I mean, I presume he decided against using the stones rather than getting caught because it didn't look like there was anybody nearby him during that scene. There was all those crane shots, and you didn't actually see like someone sneaking up through the undergrowth. But so that presumably did he go back to the Mohawks or did he just go away from the stones and got caught again? I mean, we might find out later on, but it felt kind of unintuitive. I was like, what happened? And right, the other side of it though is this episode's clearly a bit of a set-up episode. I mean, there's only 2 episodes after this, so we're coming to the end of the season, and usually in great sort of Game of Thrones tradition, this the second last episode tends to be the big exciting one. So I mean that makes sense. So with this one, with two left, I can see that they're actually setting up for these things because we've now got Murtagh and Bonnet both in jail. We've got Roger in this kind of Indian punchy hell, and we've still no idea how Jamie and Claire are going to get him away from there. Bree might be okay for the minute, but now she's engaged to Lord John, which I mean that seems fair, but that could cause issues when they get Roger home. Because I mean, I presume they will get Roger home because let's face it, it's that kind of show. I mean, and also if they were going to kill him, I'm sure they would have done it by now. But my prediction for like next week is that's probably going to be all about Murtagh because let's face it, Murtagh's like he's kind of the Joker in the pack here because he's already dead in the book, so they could do absolutely anything with him at all. I mean, he could get hanged, he could escape, he could get locked up for years, he could anything. I mean, it could go any way, and I think it could give the writers of the show free reign to just do whatever they want with this as long as it doesn't conflict with the main plot. I also think that because I don't see them tying up the Roger plot just yet, because I mean, surely you want to leave that for finale, because otherwise, I mean, what's the last episode going to be about unless something completely new pops up? But in fact, thinking about it, I mean, it kind of reminds me of a bit of last season, because you know how they've been chasing all across like the forest to like try and find Roger. I mean, last season they chased all across like the oceans in Jamaica to rescue Ian, and then like season one they chased all the way across like Scotland trying to find Jamie at the end, and then in season two they chased all the way across Britain to save Scotland from England or something. Okay, maybe not. Anyway, but it was a very busy episode. I mean, it might not have been the most fascinating one, but I still enjoyed it, and I'm still happy and I'm invested in the show. But please, let me know what you think in the comments below, or chase me up on Twitter, and just let me know what you think about this, because I mean, episodes like this are the ones where I'm not entirely sure, because it's been quite mixed around, and there's a lot of things happening. It's difficult to get a handle on how much of this is book and how much of this is like completely new, and what people actually think about it. So yeah, let me know. And until next week, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.